Welcome. Today is Monday, May 9th, a special meeting of the Arlington School Committee. We are going to start right away with public participation, and we have 3 people on the docket. Welcome, Timur Yontar. Did I get your pronunciation right?
Excuse me?
Did I get the pronunciation right?
Timur Yontar.
Yontar, okay, thanks. Great.
Hi, you all know me, Timur Yontar, Bates Road, Thompson Parent, town meeting member from Precinct 7. I'm here today to thank the school committee and its members on the school enrollment task force for all their work since last fall, leaving no stone unturned to solve middle school overcrowding, and to ask the question, are there still any stones left unturned? The administration, this committee, and the task force have examined many different potential solutions for this enrollment crisis. They had feasibility studies performed for the leading candidates, an Ottoson expansion, and a Gibbs renovation. The result was that the Gibbs renovation would have a lower capital cost, as well as provide greater long-term flexibility to the town as an asset. At the same time, the superintendent came out in favor of Gibbs over Ottoson, and in particular of an all-town 6th grade at Gibbs rather than an East Arlington 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school at Gibbs, based upon superior educational outcomes. Her advocacy of the Gibbs 6 option was strongly joined by middle school teachers and administration at Ottoson. The school committee voted in favor of Gibbs over Ottoson based upon educational outcomes and delivered that resolution to the task force. The task force considered operating costs as well. The analysis is still under review, and many of its assumptions have been challenged and undermined. Nevertheless, the high-level result was that Gibbs 6 was believed to be somewhat more expensive to operate than an expanded Ottoson, whereas the incremental cost of Gibbs 6, 7, 8 was believed to be roughly twice as high. The Finance Committee chair saw a way to fund the gap for Gibbs 6, but not the twice as large gap for Gibbs 6, 7, 8. Consequently, the task force resolved in favor of Gibbs and to have this committee, quote, take into serious account the financial issues, unquote, that were raised. I attended that meeting, and it was a call for fiscal prudence, which by happy coincidence is in full alignment with the expressed preference of a Gibbs 6 over 6, 7, 8 on educational outcomes. The last stone, it seems, and since all the others have been discarded, there is no other choice, is this. The school committee must ratify the consensus that has already emerged among the superintendent, the Ottoson faculty, the task force, including several members of this committee, and the chair of FinCom, that Gibbs 6 is the best and the only path forward. And what more is there to be done? Why call a special meeting of the school committee tonight and then dither? As always, time is of the essence. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. John Ellis. Hello.
Good evening. My name is John Ellis. I live on Teal Street. I have a kindergartner in the Hardy School. I've admired from afar the process that you've run and want to talk about an issue that's important to me, which is traffic and walkability, particularly as it relates to your decision about a town-wide 6th grade or a 6th, 7th, 8th at the Gibbs School. Some weeks ago, I used a program called ArcGIS, which is a modeling program, to figure out what percentage of students might be walkable in a situation with 2 middle schools, one in the east and one in the west. And about 70% of the students would be walkable under that scenario. If you were to have 2 all town-wide schools, town-wide 6th and 7th, 8th, about 25% of the people would be walkable. In the case of a town-wide 6th, there would be traffic impacts. And while the school committee and the task force hired experts to look at demographics and the number of students that would be coming into the district, while they hired experts to think about educational outcomes, while they hired experts to think about building costs and operational costs, the committee did not engage with the town's own GIS planner to determine the impact of traffic. I spoke to him on Tuesday of last week. He had not been engaged. He had not been asked. And I would encourage the committee in its decision-making to think about these impacts. I am not a traffic expert, but our town employs people who are traffic experts. If you make a decision to do a townwide sixth grade at Gibbs, some things will change about traffic in town. For one, traffic will be heading east. Currently, traffic is mostly going west to Ottoson Middle School. That might mean an extra 100 cars, an extra 200 cars. I don't know how many cars. I'm not an expert. Depends on how many people bus, how many walk. Will an extra 100 cars or an extra 200 cars going through Arlington Center and coming down Mass Ave in a 15-minute period and 3 light changes have a traffic impact? I think so, but I don't know. I'd like you to ask the experts. What will happen as the traffic comes past Walgreens and stops at the light and then needs to take the left-hand turn just past the BP station to get down to the Gibbs School? Will those cars start to back up as they try to make that left, and the traffic coming westbound at Marion comes and blocks them off, and students walk across the intersection? Will we have Mass Ave blocked all the way back up to the Dunkin' Donuts, and parents letting their kids out in the middle of the street to dash across while the lights changed? I don't know, but I would encourage the committee, when you're making a decision as important as this one, not to just consider the impact. Considering means listening to people like me complaining, which I don't think I have the expertise, but actually study the issue, to ask people who are experts to give you all of the information.
Oh, right.
And in the end, I just want to say, that's not the only thing I think is important. I believe educational outcomes are important. I believe your operational costs are important. But I think that you owe it to yourselves and you owe it to the community to have all of the facts at your hands when you're making this big decision. Thank you.
Thanks. So I've not been timing people, so we'll do that from now on. Okay, Phil Goff, please.
Hello there. Thanks for having me here. And my name is Phil Goff. I live on 94 Grafton Street, town meeting member, Precinct 7. And I'm here to talk about the Gibbs building issue. And I want to follow up on some of the good talk that I think Mr. Hopp just presented. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to the hard work I know the committee here, both the working group and school committee, has done. I'm thrilled that in the analysis of an Ottoson expansion versus the Gibbs building, that the Gibbs building is the one, seems to be the option that is most preferred here by the committee. But I want to talk a little bit about the distinction between the 6th only school and the 6th, 7th, 8th. I can appreciate what Mr. Yontar said, and I know that there are other financial issues, and I think those are very important. There are important issues of maintaining the cluster system, issues of keeping programs together. I kind of get that. I understand the need for those. And how that can be very beneficial to maintain those and have a 6th grade only at the Gibbs School. I think it's really important to look not just at the traffic issues, as important as those are, but the inverse of traffic and car traffic issues is walking and biking. I think if you look at right now the ratio of kids in a 6th grade only at the Gibbs versus a 7th and 8th only at Ottoson and the different combinations, you're talking about a very small percentage of kids who can walk and bike to school in the 7th, 8th scenario at Ottoson and the 6th scenario at the Gibbs. I think if you looked at a full 6th, 7th, 8th at the Gibbs building, we're talking about virtually 100% of all the students in 6th, 7th, 8th at the Gibbs building, and not quite 100%, but still a very large percentage. I'd say the majority in a 6th, 7th, 8th up at Ottoson who are in walking and biking distance. This, of course, has some benefits from a traffic point of view, as Mr. Hopp talked about a little bit. I won't get into that, but I think it could be significant, and I do hope that before a final decision is made, that perhaps the Transportation Advisory Committee would look into it. But having schools that have a very high percentage, if not close to 100%, at the Gibbs building, students who are walking and biking to school, it's not just cool, I think it's cool to have a walkable, bikeable neighborhood. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. It's beyond that. It's really, there are a lot of studies that show that walking and bicycling to school, I'm sure you all are somewhat familiar with Safe Routes to School and the concept. Children who are walking and biking to school, they're getting that activity, It's good for public health. They are more aware in the morning. It's kind of like having a good breakfast. Academic studies show that is my time up? I wasn't
Your
sure how
time's
much
up.
time I had.
Yes. 3
Academic
minutes.
performance is heightened. Behavioral issues are mitigated when kids are walking and biking to school. I think that's very critical, along with the traffic issues. I think a 6th, 7th, 8th, the cost issues, I know they're higher, but I don't think it's necessarily a solution to externalize those costs to the parents who are going to be driving and all the time wasted schlepping kids around town of Arlington. So I thank you very much. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So actually, I happen to live on Teal Street. We have many, many Johns and many Jonathans, strangely. But this was Mr. Ellis, John Ellis, who spoke previously. Lots of Johns. The other John lives there as well. Mr. Tosti, do you want to say a few words, or do you? I know you came in after the. Yeah. Do you want as part of public comment? Okay. So you also have 3 minutes, if that's.
Excuse me. I wasn't planning to speak, but the town has huge challenges ahead of us. I don't think I need to tell you that, but we do, and they're largely financial challenges. And I am finding it harder and harder to get school projects through the Finance Committee. The Minuteman passed the Finance Committee 10 to 8. The Gibbs passed the Finance Committee 11 to 8. Now, this is not a right-wing group. This is a group that has supported education and supported schools for a long, long time. But people are really started to get nervous about the operating costs and how much we're going to be putting on the taxpayer over the next 5 years. And when I got the memo on the difference in the operating costs between the 6th grade only and the 6th, 7th, and 8th, the $1.4 million projection was staggering. It was just too high. We can't do it. It's even 730,000. I was hoping to get some give back from the schools on that, but at least it's maybe somewhat doable. We can't afford another $1.4 million in operating costs in the budgets. We can't. It's going to, right now, you know what the 5-year plan looks like, and you know that right now the override needed for a 3-year plan that we would have to have in June of 2020 is probably beyond the capabilities of passage. Now, if we add $1.4 million for, even though it's for 2 years, it just jacks it up even more. So that was the primary concern. Whether you look at it over 30 years, like Mr. Foskett did, or whether you look at it like 1 year at a time, which is sort of how I look at it, it's got to be a major, major issue. And going through the superintendent's memo, it seems fairly straightforward. I mean, if it's a 6th grade only school, it's just 6th grade. It's a little bit of an extension of the elementary school. It seems simpler, and I could understand why it's a lot less costly than trying to reproduce a whole nother middle school with everything there. And I am really requesting that you're either able to reduce that down to a much lower figure, or you go with the 6th grade option. It sounds like so far it's what people want to do, at least on the administration and the teachers in administration at the Ottoson. And I've spoken to several of you on the school committee. So I'd urge you, as you go through this decision making, remember, this is only the first vote on the Gibbs. We've got to get another one next October, that you proceed to constantly have in mind those operating costs, because we don't want to have a 6 through 8 Gibbs and then lose everything else because we have no money to hire teachers for it. So I've said this to you several times, and I guess this again, but this is where I'm coming from. If I have trouble getting that through the Finance Committee now, if this keeps going on, you could imagine the trouble I'll have getting school-oriented projects through the FinCom. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on next to, and actually, let me just tell you a little bit about the timing of our decision-making process. This Thursday, we will get a formal recommendation from the superintendent of her choice for the Gibbs configuration. And we just finalized the details that on Tuesday, the 24th at 7 o'clock in Town Hall, we will be holding a public forum to present Audison teachers' perspectives, superintendent's perspective, and then also just hear from people about their thoughts and concerns. Dr. Allison Ampe.
Can you repeat what's going to happen on Thursday that
Yes.
the superintendent's giving us?
So on Thursday, the superintendent is going to offer a formal recommendation. She's
On-
on the Gibbs configuration.
Okay.
So she's given us her thoughts in the past, but we haven't seen sort of a
Okay.
formal proposal with her explanation and her
Just didn't
thinking
understand.
behind.
Okay.
Right, so that's what we're seeing on Thursday.
I'm sorry, when was the forum?
And then the forum is on Tuesday, the 24th, 7 o'clock in Town Hall. And that's not a school committee meeting per se, that's a open forum. So just in terms of. And then after that, we will talk to each other and we'll sort of have those conversations amongst us, which we haven't really had a chance to have yet. Yes,
So
Mr.
Thursday,
Thielman.
5/26 would be is what you're proposing as the date of vote?
In terms of the vote?
Yeah.
I think we have to see if we're ready to do that. You know, that we will consider that.
All right.
It sort of depends. Yes, Mr. Trainer.
I mean, I think very strongly, the 26th, we've worked on this, we were going to have a forum, we didn't have the forum, we now got a forum. I think that it behooves us to set a specific date, and the 26th should be that date, for at least the discussion and the possibility of a vote that
Yes,
night.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Yes,
fine.
yes, that's what I'm
Thank
saying. My only reason I can't promise that is we haven't really yet talked to each other. So we, even though we might have our own opinions, we really haven't had that public conversation with each other.
So if I may,
yeah.
on the 26th,
Yes.
we will have a discussion.
And possibly a
and
vote.
And you would entertain a motion that night?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
What time's the forum on the 24th?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Yes, 7 to
Here.
9. Here, Town Hall, right. Okay, so we have this emergency or last-minute meeting because we wanted to talk about our consideration or reaction to what happened at the School Enrollment Task Force. So if we can sort of first give the public a brief explanation of what the task force recommended, maybe Dr. Bodie or Ms. Starks, to just sort of recap what went on in the task force meeting. Oh, no. Ms. Starks? Yeah, good.
So at the last task force meeting, the task force voted, and it was not a unanimous vote, but it did pass, that the school enrollment task force voted to accommodate the growth in the middle school by using the Gibbs school. And in that, they also wanted us to take into consideration the costs, so I believe that part of the motion was that we would take into consideration the costs and the feedback from Mr. Tosti and Mr. Foskett about the costs and kind of move forward. So I believe that was kind of the gist of it. I think that I really appreciate the way that Mr. Foskett was able to put the numbers together. I know I was trying to do a similar thing and I just couldn't get it to work. Not that I was trying to prove one way or the other. I was just trying to get a total cost. I still feel like we need to do maybe some more work on that and kind of come up with I know that the budget, I saw your minutes, that you did do some work on that. So I'm interested in kind of coming out with ours. I thought it was very positive that only 2 members voted against the motion. and I think that, you know, it was a good discussion. I thought it was really nicely discussed. I don't think there was any animosity. I think that everybody just kind of brought to bear the information they had and their point of view, and yet, you know, that was the decision by the task force.
Other task force members want to comment on, Mr. Hayner?
Cindy covered it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, good. Other members want to give their sort of comments, reaction to what they saw? There was, I know that Dr. Allison Ampe was working on some counter numbers. We don't have that, not ready for prime time yet.
No,
Okay.
there's, as we discussed in budget, we noticed that there's some discrepancies between what we thought were the updated numbers, and I've since figured out where the discrepancies lie, but I haven't had a chance to discuss with the superintendent and make sure that my analysis is correct.
Okay, great. Okay. So then what happened is I actually had a series of conversations with Mr. Tosti about just the financial issues. And we worked on a possible motion to talk about tonight, which was then sent to the budget subcommittee, and which met on Friday. And I was wondering if Dr. Allison Ampe could talk about what happened there.
So let me pull up my minutes. So we did receive your motion. We looked at it as a subcommittee. We were joined, new budget subcommittee is myself, Mr. Carden, Mr. Schlickman, and we were joined by Mr. Hayner and Mr. Thielman, as well as a number of
So people having trouble hearing it.
I'm talking,
It's not magnifying, so you're going to
Oh,
have
it
to.
does magnify. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
Diane, is there a way
Okay.
to shut the air off here? And
yeah,
that might help.
Yeah.
Let's shut the air off and then
okay.
that could help.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good.
That'll
good.
help.
That will help. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I'll start again. So, budget met on Friday. The new budget subcommittee is Mr. Carden, Mr. Schlickman, and myself. Mr. Hayner and Mr. Thielman also were able to join us, and as well as a number of members of the administration and Mr. Carmen on Finance Committee and Mr. Fanning. So we discussed the numbers that had already been talked about, trying to do some sort of counter analysis, and decided that it needed more work. Then we moved on to the motion, which had been forwarded to us from Dr. Seuss. The subcommittee members did not feel comfortable endorsing that motion. Some members of the subcommittee felt that it's important not to make the Gibbs decision tonight, that the process has not been completed, and we eventually we decided not to take a stand on it. However, we understood the concerns that were raised by members of the Finance Committee and other members of the public about the financial implications of any decision that we would make, and we tried to, given that we were starting from a position that we did not feel that, or we were not comfortable suggesting to the full committee that we should make the Gibbs 6 versus 8 decision tonight, we tried to craft a motion that would show where our thinking was coming from. And can I read that
Yes,
motion?
that'd be great. Yes.
Okay. So the motion that was created and eventually passed 3-0 to be forwarded, to be recommended to the full school committee was as follows. The Arlington School Committee endorses the School Enrollment Task Force vote on May 2nd, 2016 to accommodate the growth in the middle school age enrollment in town by repurposing the Gibbs School as a middle school, and the recommended vote of Finance Committee that the town appropriate and borrow the sum of $2,550,000 for the architectural design, engineering, and project management of the Gibbs School building, contingent on passage of a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion referendum. The school committee further moves that for the purpose of projecting incremental cost, the superintendent and the finance committee shall use costs associated with the configuration of the Gibbs School as a town-wide 6th grade facility and that the school committee would work within projected allocations if the committee decides to advance a model with 2 6-8 grade middle schools. Finally, the school committee further directs the superintendent to work with the Arlington Center of the Arts, ACA, to identify space that can be used in the ACA summer camp in 2017. So that's the motion that we discussed and eventually passed. We felt that it did indicate our understanding that the grade 6 configuration is the cheaper one, and it gave us a way of managing if we feel educationally that it's important to go with 2 middle schools. So,
And I second that motion.
Okay.
Oh.
So, yeah, so I was actually just going to,
Oh,
so that is,
yes.
that's a formal motion
So
at this
that's
point, I think,
the-
right?
The budget subcommittee is bringing that motion to.
Bringing the motion by Dr. Allison Ampe, seconded by Mr. Schlickman. Is there discussion of the motion? Mr. Cardin?
Thank you. So I've obviously supported the motion at the budget subcommittee meeting. We now have this other meeting scheduled, and it did seem premature to commit the school committee to one thing when we're still going through the process. But we did hear the concerns of the finance committee. Looking at the 2 different options, there's things to think about. So, I'm not sure why having a 6th grade only requires 1 art teacher, but a 6th through 8 requires 1.5 art teachers. So I think there's more information we need about the costs, and to look into that to see why it's so much more expensive, and to really see if we can get the cost down so that the 6th to 8th grade model might be viable. But we are committing with this motion to not requesting the additional funds over the $700,000 should we end up pursuing that motion. So that should satisfy, hopefully, a lot of the financial concerns that are currently around when town meeting votes on this later this week.
Mr. Schlickman?
Thank you. Mr. Carmen made a point at the subcommittee meeting, which is a valid one, is that the people need a certain amount of warning and an ability to participate in the discussion before we cast the formal and decisive vote. That said, the preponderance of the evidence as it stands right now, superintendent has stated that the 6 only at Gibbs is the educationally preferable option. The teachers have come before us and said that the 6 only at the Gibbs is the educationally preferable option. Fiscally, it appears to be the most responsible move. Unless one of those 3 pillars move, I can't see myself voting for anything other than the 6th grade option at the Gibbs. This motion, I think, is crafted in such a way that I feel my intent in the evidence that is within it. That we're not, that I, at the very least, am not going to go wandering off and do a more expensive option that is not recommended by the administration. And I hope the Finance Committee takes this vote as what it is sort of showing that we understand what they came to us and said, and accepting the reality, the fiscal realities of the town as much as we're accepting the reality of the educational options, which is why I'm very pleased to support this motion. I think this is the right thing to do, and I urge my colleagues to support it as well.
Mr. Hayner?
Thank you. Don't always agree with Mr. Schlickman, but tonight wholeheartedly. I appreciate the 2 gentlemen that came in tonight and talked about the potential configurations. I have received 1 email on this. I hope that the community that look at both sides comes to that open forum. I think it's very important for us to hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Thielman?
So to clarify, I want to ask a question, and then make a few comments. I just want to clarify, so the school committee owns any cost over and above the cost of operating a 6th grader. So if we have the 6th through 8th grade model, that's our responsibility, not the town's, it's the school committee's responsibility. Okay. My thinking is very close to Timur Yantar's and Paul Schlickman's and Bill Hayner's, and I understand the need to involve more people in the process. Public should know that we have taken a look at the 6th grade option at the Gibbs versus the 6th through grade option. We had a curriculum instruction assessment committee meetings in late March and early April. I think on the school enrollment task force, there's a chart that was done. Granted, we have a new member of the school committee who is a great mind and can probably take a look at that chart and make it better. We want to make sure we get more input on things. The comments that were made earlier about traffic and walkability, we looked at that. There's going to be more traffic if we have a sixth grade at the Gibbs, and fewer students are going to walk. So we acknowledge that in the research that we've done. We have evidence from the teachers and the administrators and the people that work with the children every day in the Ottoson Middle School, and their overwhelming recommendation is that the sixth grade is the best option educationally. Some of the people on the school committee have looked at the sixth grade school in Needham, and that school has shown great results and has a great spirit and is something that we can replicate here in Arlington with the resources and the people that we have. I've talked to some people in Needham who have children in the sixth grade, who have had children in the sixth grade school there, and they absolutely love it. It's been the best thing for their children. So the sense is that there's a lot of people on the school committee who are very close to just saying this is the way we want to go, but I understand fully the importance of a process. I like the idea of a forum on the Tuesday the 24th. I'm interested in hearing Dr. Bodie's recommendation on Thursday evening at 6:30 in the school committee room, and I hope that the committee has enough information, has done enough research to take a vote on the 26th. I would say to anybody here that if more research is done or is needed, so if more, we have the question, the conversation, the presentation that was made tonight about the need to bring in the TAC and do some more research on walkability and traffic, but I think it's pretty self-evident, but I think it's worth doing that kind of a study if people want to. But any information that we need, the sooner we ask the school administration for it, the better. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be helpful if we get to the 26th and say, oh, by the way, did you look at this, that, and the other thing? So if people have questions or if they want a subcommittee to meet to look at something, we need to know that by Thursday night. People need to come to the meeting on Thursday night, say, here are the questions that I want answered, give them to the superintendent. If it needs to be delegated to a subcommittee, that needs to happen on Thursday night. And that subcommittee needs to meet and do the additional research, or the superintendent needs to do the additional research. But I want the best school system in the world, but I'm paying a lot of attention to what Mr. Tosti and the Finance Committee members are saying. I think that we're one town. We all have to work together. We're trying to pass a debt exclusion vote on June 14th, and I think it's important that we're unified, that we're on the same page, and I think we can be if we go through this process. So I'm going to vote for the motion, but I wanted to make sure the public knows where I stand.
Okay.
Dr. Allison. Yep.
So on Friday, as chair, I didn't actually get a chance to say much about what I was thinking because I was too busy making sure that everyone else was heard. But I was personally very glad that we did not vote on the motion that had been forwarded to us by Dr. Seuss, because I feel that I support what we've seen, that right now the grade 6 only option is looking educationally better for our students. However, I feel that people need to be heard, partly because the concerns that they raise are things that we can address. We know traffic's a problem, so let's figure out where the problem is and how to fix it, not just say, I'm not trying to put down Mr. Thielman, but not just acknowledge that we know there's more traffic.
I'm a big boy.
So we need to be raising problems now so we can solve them in the future. The other reason that I would not have felt comfortable voting for the motion, Dr. Seuss's motion, was that one of the problems that we heard from some of the teachers was the concerns of the special education community. And we have not yet heard how those are being addressed. I know that we're having some personnel issues right now in terms of how we're going to get those answers, but I would feel much more comfortable if I was hearing some information about how the concerns specifically of the special education teachers and of parents and students are going to be addressed in a sixth grade only model. So I think those are my main comments.
Anything else? So I'd just like to, I think, reflect two sort of requests I've heard tonight. One is to look at questions of traffic, maybe come up with a plan. Maybe it's a hybrid plan where kids walk to a central place and they get picked up, or they get dropped off someplace and then walk part of the way to mitigate traffic. Second is a request to look at the special education programs and how to make that work with the sixth grade model, since we've heard that's a concern. And I just want to add one more, which is that it would be great to hear fairly soon what will be special about a sixth grade only model. So there's been sort of some talk that we could have a slightly different program there if it was only sixth grade than a sixth or eighth. But we haven't yet seen sort of details. So it'd be great to, so I know it's a lot to ask for, but it'd be great to hear some of that. And I know that Mr. Schlickman has more.
I have one other question. I mean, all 7 of our elementary schools are walkable. How many cars are going through those schools right now? Because walkability doesn't mean that the kid is actually going to walk to school. There are a lot of kids who are walkable to schools who end up in cars. So that number of how many elementary kids are being dropped off by cars, I think is an interesting question.
Mr. Cardin.
And I definitely don't want to add too much to the workload, and maybe this has already been done, at least unofficially, but a couple members of the community have asked if people have looked into the educational research on this. And I've done an amateur effort, and there isn't very much that's very conclusive. What is out there seems to indicate that transitions are in general negative. Now they have slight effects on dropout rates and slight effects on academic performance, but so just slightly negative overall. But I couldn't find anything that addresses this specific issue of adding an additional transition. Most of the research seems to be going with a K through 8 rather than going with a middle school model. So if someone who does have a PhD or EDD could take a quick look at the research and just confirm my own view that there's not a whole lot out there that can guide us, that would be great.
Mr. Thielen.
So having been a school administrator, it's hard to answer every single question in contingency in a 2 or 3 week period. A lot of times, you really work out the details of a plan for traffic, or you work out the details of a plan for even special education, because you have to comply with the law, as you move towards the opening of the school. So I don't think it's realistic to think that every single question people have can be answered in the next few weeks. That's a tall order.
Yep.
The other thing is the research. I happen to know a little bit about this because the research on transitions usually addresses students who move from school to school or district to district over the course of their lives, often kids in poverty. So we're in a different situation. I'm not saying we don't have students who are in poverty in this district. I'm not saying we don't have people who haven't moved from town to town and school to school over the course of their time, but most of that research relates to that issue and not a town like Arlington where people are in one K through 5 school, then one 6th grade school, then one 7 and 8 school, and one high school. So it's hard to get research like that on a town like Arlington. It's not out there. The best research actually is the experience of Needham, because that's a community a lot like Arlington. The best research is what happened in that school, what those kids have experienced, what that district has experienced, and any evidence that might be out there about growth scores, SGPs, growth scores and increases on test scores, whatever data that district might have would be helpful. That's the best data that we can look at, because we're a lot like Needham.
Okay, Dr. Allison Happy.
Yeah, I've also done some research on my own as an educated amateur, as Mr. Cardin, and what I found was that there's nothing that talks. Most of the research seems to me to be talking about people who are kids who are coming from different schools and then mixing. I mean, they don't talk about it, but when you look at the situations, that's what's happening. There's nothing that I can see that talks about the effects of a group coming together and all making the same transition and then another transition. And I think that is going to be, my sense from having watched middle school kids and stuff, is that the social aspects are a whole lot of the transition. And if you have this whole group which has come together and all mixed and they're great and they just move on, it's going to be very different than just comparing to the results from a generic study that's just looking at transitions. So again, if anyone who is an expert in this has more knowledge of truly comparable studies, that'd be great. But I think Mr. Thielman's right that Needham's our best study.
Mr. Hayner.
I spent a lot of time trying to get evidence to support a 6, 7, and 8 initially. What I found was exactly what you said, that the major issue was multiple transitions. But like Mr. Thielman said, or Mr. Schlickman, I'm sorry, I don't remember which, a lot of that was based on demographics and low poverty causing the issues. What convinced me to support the concept of currently supporting the 6th grade model was going down to Needham. And basically what Dr. Amby just said is that emotional aspect of it. There is nothing, as far as I can spend, I spent 3 days looking for things on again, off again, and the only thing that came out is exactly what you said at the beginning.
Anyone else? Mr. Schlickman.
Just this transition thing is like a pork chop. If it's well done, it's healthy. If it's uncooked, if it's not well done, it can make you pretty sick. And you go around the state and you see very different places. And Dracut is one of the most dysfunctional districts in the state. And they have multiple transitions on a single campus going down the same road. The schools are next to each other, and each and every transition seems to be a train wreck. They don't talk to each other, nothing happens. Needham, on the other hand, has designed this 6, 7, 8 model so they grab hold of the kids in 6th grade, they embrace them, they care for them, they move them deliberately, they support them. I think we're more like Needham than we are like Dracut. I think that we can pull this off and do a really good job of it.
They eat more pork chops than Needham? Is it?
I don't know, but yeah, it's not kosher, but what can I tell
Yeah,
you?
it's not kosher. Any other remarks? We have just a couple minutes more? No? Okay. Ready to vote on this motion. Actually, I'll just put a remark. The motion that Mr. Tosti and I discussed had 2 parts, and I recognize that only one of the parts is sort of satisfied by this motion. That was what the committee was, the budget subcommittee was willing to agree to at this point. We sort of recognize that we don't have control over the finances, so, but we'll see going through. But this was, at this point in time, this is what the budget subcommittee was willing to agree to, and this is the motion on the table. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion as read by Dr. Allison Ampe and the budget subcommittee, coming from the budget subcommittee, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, it's a unanimous vote. Thanks. Okay, we just have one more item. So I just want to give some background on this. There have been some unfortunate incidents across town and at the Audison of discriminatory writings, defacing of the Black Lives Matter banner. Just some really unfortunate incidents in town. I think Arlington is not alone in this, but it is nevertheless deeply disturbing to see it happen here. Sharon Grossman and I were talking about this, and we were trying to figure out a way that the school committee can make a public statement, and we're still working on other ideas, but one possible idea was that we would co-sponsor the next event that they're holding, which is Building an Inclusive and Welcoming Community. It's on Tuesday, May 17th at 6:45 in the Robbins Library Community Room. And see if I don't have the language. Do we have other language? I'm afraid I don't have the rest of the language. But I was wondering if, so I want to make a motion, I guess, that we co-sponsor this event. Do I have a second? Yeah. Dr. Allison Ampe, second. Any discussion of the motion? Yes, Ms. Starks.
What does it mean?
What does it mean to co-sponsor? I think it means that publicly our name goes on the advertising material for the event.
Do they need us to do anything? What's the
No.
point of the forum? What's the?
Yeah, so I wish I had brought up my, sorry. Do we have, Karen, do you have the, I'm sorry, I was looking at it earlier, I just don't have it with me. Let me get it here. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so let me just read what the forum, what the advertising forum says so far. The Arlington Human Rights Commission, in partnership with Facing History and Ourselves, invites you to an interactive community dialogue as we talk about Arlington, building an inclusive and welcoming community. We will use text written by George Washington and video from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I'm terrible at names, author of Americana. I think this was the book that was read by the community, right? Arlington's community read, to engage in a dialogue that uses our history as well as our present to inform our discussion around building an inclusive community in Arlington that welcomes all. So again, this is Tuesday, May 17th from 6:45 to 8:45 at the Robbins Library Community Room downstairs. Light refreshments are going to be supplied. So this was, there's just sort of this thought that we as a school committee, we as a community need to publicly avow that this is not us, this is not our values, it's not what we stand for from these unfortunate incidents, from a very, very tiny proportion of our town. But we just need to take a public stand. So this is one possible way that we can do that. There's others. Any other thoughts? Yes, Dr. Allison Hanby.
I think this sounds like a good start, but I would hope that we're going to, the administration, or I don't know who else, whether we should have a subcommittee discuss and bring forward some other recommendations. I'd like,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
saying,
great.
I think this is a start, but I'd
But
like
it's
to
not
see
enough.
more.
Okay, great, thanks. Yes, Mr. Hayner.
If it goes to a subcommittee, I'd request that the superintendent bring to that subcommittee all the things that have been done to date with the issues that,
Okay. I do want to mention that on this Thursday's meeting agenda, we're going to hear some discussion about cultural competency, which will then be sent to the subcommittee considering our goals. So that might be part of our goals. So I wanted to mention that that's coming up on Thursday. Any other thoughts? Okay, so the motion is to co-sponsor the event with the Human Rights Commission on Tuesday, May 17th. All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
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 Okay, all those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, it's an unanimous vote. Okay, now we have, we're almost done, I guess. Are there any subcommittee and liaison reports and announcements?
usually do that on regular meetings.
We do them, we don't need to do it now. So, okay, so we have it listed here.
Yeah, right.
And yes,
Can we get
Ms.
some more
Starks?
information on the forum that's gonna happen on the 24th at 7 o'clock?
Sure, wasn't Dr. Bodie? Do you want to give information about the forum? So, information about the forum.
Well, I think that the plan is to have sort of a summary presentation of where we are, and hopefully we'll have some middle school teachers that will be present. And then basically, I think it's an opportunity for the community to give input to the school committee.
Mr. Hayner?
Suggestion through the chair to invite the principal from the Needham School. I mean,
I'll let her
resident,
know.
resident of Arlington, and take advantage of it. I mean, we, those of us that went that day are reflecting our interpretation of it, but she's the active principal, and she can, as she talked with us, I think that might help a lot of people understand, at least my conversion from one direction to another.
Yeah, Dr. Allison Ivy.
I was going to say, I agree that she was a very strong advocate for the grade 6 school, but I don't know if this will work for her timing-wise and
Yeah.
personal-wise.
Can
But
you-
she's
Yeah.
been done a lot of communication with the administration and stuff, so I do appreciate that.
So I guess, so we can invite her.
Just invite her.
She may, right, we should invite her, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
And we could
Yes.
promise her a dedicated 15-minute slot so she can come in and out.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great, I guess that's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Schlickman, made by Mr. Hayner. All those in favor? Aye.
Been visited.